What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Looking back at this guy's run, he was fun. I think he could have been much more. Hell, a bunch thought he was going to be one of the greatest stars of that generation. It's just a shame that he was released for testing positive for marijuana. He got popped 12 times, I should know. Nowadays, the guys pay the fine, but I don't think it diminishes a guy's push. We'll see with Matt Riddle. As for the Brian Kendrick, back in 08, he was one of the rising stars. He had the talent inside and outside the ring. He wore that little jacket, jumping around with that random walk. Ezekiel Jackson by his side, I liked him. Obviously, I hated him as a kid, but you can appreciate a bad guy, right? So how did the Brian Kendrick come to be? First of all, if you've never watched Kendrick and London's Run video that I made, you might be missing out. You already watched it, or you don't mind. I ended that video stating that the team was basically done after London smiled at Mr. McMahon explosion segment. Management and Vince himself were very angry at Paul London for doing that. They buried him, and apparently Kendrick didn't want to be a part of this. A trip to the dirt sheets taught me that London was a heat magnet backstage, whereas Kendrick had a better approach and attitude to this compared to his partner. I mean, just search Paul London shoots on WWE or whatever on YouTube and you'll understand. I personally think he hates WWE more than Scott Steiner and a bunch of others. So basically, the guys in the back had plans for Brian Kendrick. As for Paul London, they disliked his attitude, they took his shooting star press away, he was angry at Evan Bourne or whatever, and he complained. In November 2008, he ended up getting let go. And as for Brian Kendrick, well, let's get into it. On the July 18th, 2008 episode of SmackDown, the Brian Kendrick made his official debut. The tag team between himself and London ended up splitting during the 08 draft, and he came out with Ezekiel. Yeah, he was called just that, which I found funny because WWE usually does the opposite. They take a last name away rather than give it. You can notice a sharp difference in Kendrick's attitude already. JR cited him as somebody like Shawn Michaels in the Attitude Era, and the commentary team were trying to make him seem like somebody who's difficult to work with, or I don't know. Jimmy Wang Yang took the beating, and for the first time in months, Brian Kendrick stood tall. It was clear that the man, Vince, had a plan for him. Or he didn't. The following week, same thing. He dismantled Shannon Moore, and this time JR said that Kendrick reminded him of Brian Pillman. And before the match, he called himself the most intelligent wrestler in the entire WWE. Kendrick wanted the fans to cherish this moment years from now, and as for Ezekiel, if anyone is delusional enough to touch greatness, well, they're gonna have to take it up with his man, Zeke. He was slowly fleshing out his new character before matches, and at one point he admitted that there was no attitude change. This was always him, and as a matter of fact, he put on phony smiles, teamed up with Paul London to get his foot right in the door. And he admitted that he never cared about the fans, and if they have a problem with that, well, they could take it up with Big Zeke. The guy's character to me was essentially a faux philosopher, and search from the internet got me some new information on what this character was based on. Apparently, he was trying to resemble Leonardo DiCaprio. You know, I can see it. In an interview with Slam Canada back in 2004, yes, this was before his SmackDown run, Kendrick spoke about his heel character in Japan, Leonardo Spanky. This is essentially what his 2000 character was, so it was important to mention it. And I quote, "When I got there, the guy picked me up at the airport and in broken English pretty much told me that Hashimoto thinks I look like Leonardo DiCaprio." I was like, okay, whatever. The reporters are there, as they always are for whoever gets off the plane, and started asking me about what I think of Leonardo DiCaprio, and I realized that something is happening here. Also, his music ended up being the Titanic song, you know, My Heart Will Go On. Doing it in the States, I'd get killed. If they had brought me into the Fed doing that, I'd be the biggest heel in the company, not a good kind of heel. People just hate it. But over there, for whatever reason, Hashimoto knows what he's doing because it worked, so I just ran with it. Now, for obvious reasons, he reminds me of Kurt Cobain. He was intellectual with his promos and didn't rely on his strength in matches, you know, he relied on his mind. One quote of his to give you an idea of who he was this. He said that knowledge is power. Every week he did the same thing. He mocks the fans, explains why he does whatever. Zeke says 3 words and showcases his talents after the match. That's how it was for the month of August. Kendrick wasn't outright squashing his opponents. They always had a burst of momentum that almost leads to victory. And it was Jackson that greatly influenced most of the matches. Not by interfering, but just by staring at the opponent, they turn around, they receive the sliced bread or the Kendrick or whatever. After weeks of destroying lower card stars, the Brian Kendrick finally got some real competition. On the August 22nd, 2008 episode of SmackDown, Vicky Guerrero booked a 10-man championship scramble battle royal. Winner gets a spot in the match at Unforgiven. Also, what the hell is up with half of the battle royal being filled with jobbers? The favorite Kozlov was thrown out, then Big Show had enough and threw out just about everyone. None of the guys did a single thing about it. Ezekiel managed to catch Kendrick, and he ended up winning as a result of this. And of course, this got him more heat with the crowd because, well, he won without winning. Heading into the event, Kendrick wasn't exactly feeling the war aspect of being in the main event. He thought it was stupid to assert dominance before the match itself, and instead he preferred to study the guys. He gave everyone a little history lesson, reminding everyone of the art of war. You know, it's not about who wins the little battles, it's about war. And he was poised to capture the title using his intelligent mind. Compared to the others, it was a totally different approach. Kendrick wanted to walk a fine line between genius and insanity, knowing it's the way to win a title. 2 nights before the match at Unforgiven, he faced Jeff Hardy. Compared to the other matches, it was his toughest, but hey, you already know that. Funny enough, he actually ended up beating Jeff Hardy, and sure, the guy needed help, but still, it showed he wasn't going to be a one-and-done guy. Jeff was arguably, depends on your opinion, the number 2 guy at this point on SmackDown. Undertaker was only there occasionally, every once in a while. So yeah, I thought Jeff was the most over guy on SmackDown. Kendrick tried to make an impact later on, but failed miserably. On Unforgiven, he actually had a good showing. Y'all know what happened. He became the interim, scratch that, the champion in my eyes. He was very smart in utilizing his tactics initially, letting the others fight. And he took advantage and hit the Kendrick to become champion. No, I don't care. It's official. It was official in hardcore matches back in 2000. It's official to me. Brian Kendrick, the Brian Kendrick, was the WWE champion. He ended up dropping the title to Triple H about 5 minutes later and never had the same fire and intensity during the match from there on. Still a great showing from the Brian Kendrick. It showed that they had enough faith in him to push him. I mean, sure, it was interim champion, but still, like MVP nor Shelton Benjamin didn't get the opportunity to become interim champion during this match. Unfortunately, though, this ended up being his peak, not for his career, but from this run. He called himself the longest reigning champion in the championship scramble and thought he was deserving of a title shot. It wouldn't be his, though. It was Jeff's. He faced Triple H at No Mercy, and Kendrick began teaming up with Ezekiel Jackson, and they feuded with the Colognes, which meant less TV time and less promos came with this. I assume this was because he refused to lay off the marijuana. He was mad talented. The only downside could be his size, but that doesn't mean he can't be a mid-carder. That had to be the reason why. Everyone's saying that's the reason why he wasn't pushed. During this time, he was a jobber to the Stars, and they never captured the titles. And to give you an idea of how his D-push went, Kendrick from the month of December 2008 all the way up to May of 2009 never won a singles match. It's just unfortunate. Like, he could have been US or tag champion. Hell, who knows? Maybe an upper mid-carder in the future, but it just didn't happen. He lasted for 15 seconds in the Rumble. I thought the way he bounced off the ropes was hilarious. Other than that, yeah, jobber to the Stars. In April of 2009, the Brian Kendrick ended up being drafted to the Raw brand. On Raw, Kendrick was stuck in the same place. Once again, I should mention, he wasn't losing in 5 seconds. Eventually he did, but he always put up a fight and lost within 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, that's all. In May, he tried searching for the tag team partner, and his attempts at discovering a viable partner were mostly unsuccessful. One thing to note is that Goldust was a dud. Festus was Festus, and this was weirdly enough going to lead to Daniel Bryan signing with WWE and teaming up with Kendrick. It never happened, though. They signed him a month later, I should know. Back to Kendrick. On the July 20th, 2009 episode of Raw, after telling Jerry Lawler to say on commentary that he, Kendrick, deserves to be Chris Jericho's mystery partner and other champions, the King was clearly irritated with this, and so the Brian Kendrick decided to cut a promo on him. He mentioned the lack of WWE titles won by the King, and then entered the ring. What he didn't know was that the King himself was the opponent. Kendrick made Lawler look like $1,000,000, and sure, he got some shots, verbal, physical, but the crowd was all in on Jerry Lawler, and he actually ended up winning the match, which I found funny. The following week, Kendrick continued berating Jerry Lawler on the mic. He's all angry about getting embarrassed. The ref lost patience and rung the bell. Kofi rings his and ends up winning. That was his final WWE match during this run. On July 30th, 2009, Brian Kendrick was released from his WWE contract. The release was seen as quite a shocker, and I should note this was reported by the Wrestling Observer in August 2009, and I quote, "As noted earlier, WWE parted ways with the Brian Kendrick last Thursday. It would appear that the decision was actually made 2 weeks ago because he was pulled from a previously scheduled program with Evan Bourne that week. He was then booked to lose to Jerry Lawler and Kofi Kingston in humiliating fashion, and to confirm ongoing internet rumors dating back to last fall, Kendrick's push went up in smoke, so to speak, as a result of his disobedience towards the company's policy on marijuana. He had been warned several times by company officials that they weren't going to tolerate his failing drug tests for marijuana, which constitute a $1,000 fine, but not a suspension. After failing numerous tests, he was one of at least 2 wrestlers whose pushes were stopped because of their disobedience, and that was likely a major contributing factor in his departure from the company. Kendrick's release from WWE was also said to be taken as a warning to higher profile wrestlers who have been failing tests for marijuana, as company officials have said many times to a slate of wrestlers individually that they are no longer going to tolerate it. It should be noted that when Kendrick was informed by John Laurinaitis that he was being let go, he was told it was due to the economy. Those who heard it couldn't believe he gave such an obviously bogus reason, and it's also been said that Kendrick would have been released months ago, but Pat Patterson spoke up on his behalf. Damn, he was quickly gone. I personally think had he never smoked joints, he would have been much bigger. Do I think world champion? Who knows? But regardless, he's such a great chicken heel. Another thing to note is that he had an attitude problem, and it seemed like his heart wasn't in it from their perspective. I personally think it would have been cool to see him lead a faction of big guys or something that protect him at all costs. Like he comes in, holds the US title, and he's all scared of losing it. Something like Edge, but take a different approach, Get bigger guys to back him up or something like that. In January of 2010, he signed with TNA and captured the X Division title at Destination X 2011 from Abyss. He actually had a decent run there, and I might have to dive into in the future. There was that famous moment where Bischoff threw hot coffee right on Kendrick. The Bucks were there watching, and this clearly pissed off Bryan. He was absolutely angry at the fact that Bischoff accidentally tossed that coffee right into his arm. Yeah, it was a decent run. It wasn't bad. Eventually, 2015, he returned to WWE as part of the NXT roster, and shortly afterwards was signed to a contract. So yeah, that's Kendrick's run. I thought he had so much potential. I thought he could have been a good upper mid-carder. You know, he had a big guy next to him, Big Zeke. He has an intellectual mind also. He reads the books like Kendrick. I think it would have been cool to see Kendrick as the U.S. champion. Who knows, maybe world champion, you never know. I think he would have been great. Like, he would have shined brightly. You know, he'd have the more marquee matches. He'd get longer matches, you know. Like, Kendrick never really had a 15-minute pay-per-view match at all during this run. Not only that, like, he didn't really show off his character that much also. Like, only in the first few weeks he showed off his character and how he is, you know, he's an intellectual mind. Other than that, after Unforgiven, they just forgot about him. That's all. So yeah, what did you guys think of the Bryan Kendrick? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the camel clutch on the like button and perhaps the sliced bread on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.